Dominoes. Level 2. A Close Shave. Text adaptation by Bill Bowler. Based on Nick Park's Oscar-winning characters. Read by Wayne Forrester. Copyright Oxford University Press, 2007.
CD 2.
Chapter 5. Gromit's in Trouble. Wallace was at home in the front room, and he was reading the newspaper. The headline on the front page said, "Police Catch Sheep Killer." Under the headline, there was a big photograph of Gromit. In the photograph, Gromit was holding a big meat cutter over Sean's neck. It was the photograph from the room above the wool shop. "Gromit's in trouble now. They caught him killing sheep," said Wallace. "Killing sheep's a crime. They'll send him to prison for this, I'm sure." But Wallace wasn't alone at number 62, West Wallaby Street. His house was full of the sheep from the lorry. Just then, two of them took the newspaper that Wallace was reading in their mouths, pulled it into pieces, and ate it. "Hey, stop that!" cried Wallace. Suddenly, there was a ring at the front door. "Move!" said Wallace, and he pushed past all the sheep in the front room. He pushed past more sheep in the hall and opened the front door. Gwendoline was standing there. "I'm so sorry," she said. Sorry for what?" asked Wallace. "I can't say," answered Gwendoline. "Listen, please stay away from me. Stay away from my shop, and from its stupid, stupid windows." I, said Wallace. "Forget me. I'm no good for you," said Gwendoline. She took out a handkerchief from her coat, put it to her face, and started to cry. "I'm very sorry about Gromit," she said, and she turned her back to Wallace and cried into her handkerchief. Wallace stood in the hall full of sheep and watched Gwendoline walk away slowly down the street. Why was she sorry? He didn't understand. The next morning, a sheep bit a rope that went to the lever of the getting up in the morning machine, and it went wrong. Wallace fell down very quickly, through the bedroom floor and into the room below. "Ow!" cried Wallace. The next minute, two big sheep fell through the same hole and landed on the breakfast table in front of him. Instead of his shirt and his pullover, the machine dropped a third sheep on top of him. Said Wallace. Just then, another sheep put the morning paper on a chair next to Wallace. Wallace picked up the paper and read it at once. The headline said, "Dog explains all to police." "Oh, Gromit," said Wallace. That afternoon, Wallace read the afternoon paper. "Gromit bit me," says man. One of the sheep was standing behind Wallace, and it was reading the paper too. "Oh, Gromit," said Wallace for the second time that day. That evening, Wallace read the evening paper. "Gromit goes to prison for life." All the sheep in the living room were standing behind Wallace now, and they were all reading the paper too. "Oh, Gromit," cried Wallace sadly for the third time. All the sheep that were standing around him cried sadly too. Wallace looked up at the photo on the sitting room wall. All the sheep around him looked up at it too. The photo showed Wallace smiling, with Gromit at his side. Wallace felt very sad. What was his good old friend Gromit doing now? Gromit was lying on his prison bed. He was reading a book about prison life by the famous Russian writer-dog Fido Dostoevsky. Someone pushed a bowl of dog food through a hole in the door. Gromit looked at the food, but he wasn't hungry. Then the hole in the door opened again, and someone pushed a parcel into Gromit's prison room. Gromit quickly got up from his bed and went to pick up the parcel. He untied the parcel and found a puzzle inside it. It was a picture puzzle in a box with 5,000 pieces. The picture on the front of the box showed lots of white sheep with blue faces. "Oh no," thought Gromit, "not sheep." And he put his head in his hands and cried. Later that night, when the moon was up in the sky, Gromit finished the puzzle. When he put the last piece into place, he looked down at the finished puzzle on the table in front of him. And he had a surprise. There was the picture of the blue and white sheep. But there were some red words on the puzzle too. They said, "Friday night, 8 p.m. Be ready. A friend." Gromit looked at the calendar on the prison wall. It was Friday today. He picked up the red clock by his bed and looked at it. It was 8 o'clock. Then Gromit looked up at his window, and there was Sean with a metal cutter. Sean wanted to help Gromit escape. He quickly cut through the metal bars and helped Gromit to get out through the window. Outside the prison, Sean was standing on top of 10 other sheep. Each sheep had its feet on the shoulders of the sheep below it. At the bottom of all the sheep stood Wallace. Wallace was holding up all the sheep on his shoulders to make a ladder for Gromit to escape down. Suddenly, Wallace stood on a piece of soap on the ground. He slipped and fell on his back. At once, all the sheep and Gromit fell down on top of him. "Ah! Ooh!" cried Wallace.